If you close your eyes for a moment, you might hear it. The soft shh of waves brushing against warm sand. Not the loud kind of waves that surfers chase. No, these are sleepy waves. The kind that take their time, slide in slow, and then slide out even slower, like they don't have anywhere else to be. This is how most days begin in the Maldives. Calm, gentle, almost like the islands themselves are trying not to wake anyone up too early. And honestly, if you lived in a place this peaceful, you probably wouldn't want to rush either. Picture a long line of tiny islands, each one like a small green dot floating on a huge blue ocean. Some islands are so small that if you walked too fast, you'd reach the other side before you even finished your morning stretch. Others are bigger, full of tall coconut trees leaning in different directions, like they're posing for photos. The air here is warm, but not in a "why is the sun trying to cook me" kind of way. It's warm in a soft blanket way, a cozy warm, the kind that makes you breathe a little deeper and say, yeah, this feels nice. Now, long before the fancy resorts came along, before infinity pools, floating breakfasts, and Instagram travelers doing dramatic underwater hair flips, the Maldives was home to quiet island communities. Fishermen mending nets by hand, mothers preparing rice before sunrise, kids chasing crabs on the beach. Life moved slow, steady, and simple. And at the center of it all, in the island capital of Male, there was a royal family. Not the kind with huge stone castles or armored guards standing around pretending not to blink. The palace here was made from coconut wood and coral stone. It wasn't towering or intimidating. It looked more like a place where you'd take off your slippers before entering. Soft lanterns lit the walkways at night, giving the place a warm glow. Inside this peaceful palace lived three princesses, Amani, Zulfana, and Shehnaz. And trust me, even in a world as calm as the Maldives, these three managed to create the biggest waves, emotional waves, at least. Every young man in the islands seemed to have a quiet crush on one of them. Some even liked all three, but we won't judge them for that. Island life was slow. They had time for multiple crushes. But before we talk about the princesses, and we will with all the warm details they deserve, we need to set the scene properly. Because understanding their world makes their story feel like a gentle tide instead of a sudden splash. Imagine the early morning on an island. Not the city morning where alarms scream at you and traffic honks like everyone swallowed a trumpet. No, island mornings are soft. The sun rises like a shy guest slowly joining a party. The sky shifts from deep blue to a pale peach color. A few fishing boats, still smelling of salt and seaweed, begin drifting out. The fishermen aren't rushing. They move with the rhythm of someone who knows the ocean personally. The smell of the sea mixes with the smell of coconut husks drying in the sun. There's always a little breeze, just enough to lift the ends of your hair and remind you the world is alive. And somewhere, not too far from the shore, you might hear the call of a fruit dove or the flutter of a bat returning home after a night of flying around looking for snacks. This is the Maldives before modern times. Quiet, gentle, honest. A place where people believed in stories about sea spirits, lucky shells, and old legends that drifted from island to island like messages in a bottle. It's in this calm world that our three princesses grew up. And they weren't the dramatic type of princesses who demand gold crowns, fan their faces dramatically, or yell, "Bring me my royal slippers." They were softer than that, kinder. They spent time among the people, talked with fishermen, laughed with children, and walked through the market without acting like they were made from diamonds. Naturally, this made them pretty irresistible. But today, in this first chapter, we're not diving into who loved whom or who wrote which secret poem or who sighed dramatically after seeing a princess walk by. That's all coming later. For now, we're simply settling into the setting. The warm ocean air, the slow pace, and the gentle heart of island life. Because this story, like the Maldives, should not be rushed. If you walk along one of the northern atolls, you might see little wooden houses with patched roofs. Smoke rises from simple kitchens as women prepare breakfast, maybe some mashuni, a tasty mix of tuna, coconut, onion, and chili, eaten with warm roshi. Men tie their boats, tighten ropes and check knots passed down through generations. Even the dogs walk slowly here, like they understand island time. In the distance, you might notice a traditional drum called a bodu beru being tested for an upcoming celebration. The rhythm is slow and deep, like a heartbeat. Every part of the Maldives seems to be moving to the same quiet rhythm. And at the center of this rhythm was the palace, surrounded by gardens of jasmine, breadfruit trees, and soft coral pathways that glowed in the moonlight. The palace wasn't loud or fancy. It didn't sparkle or shout for attention. It simply existed, the same way the islands existed, calmly, confidently, beautifully. Inside, the princesses grew up hearing stories about their ancestors, stories of sailors who followed star paths, women who could read ocean currents, and old kings who built peace using nothing but patience and coconut diplomacy. Yes, that's a real thing. In the islands, sharing a fresh coconut could settle all kinds of disagreements. Maybe the modern world should take notes. The Maldives was a place of balance, between land and sea, between day and night, between tradition and change. And the princesses were part of that balance. They weren't just admired for how they looked. People fell for their calmness, their kindness, their small jokes, and their soft manners. But all of that comes later, in the next chapters. Right now, just imagine yourself standing on a sandy beach, watching the sun start its lazy climb into the sky. The water is clear enough to see the fish swimming like tiny silver arrows. A canoe glides past quietly. A coconut falls somewhere in the distance with a soft thump. The world is peaceful, slow, and completely unbothered. This was their world. And it's where our story begins, on these soft, quiet islands where love didn't arrive with fireworks or fanfare. It arrived like the waves do, slowly, gently, one small moment at a time.
If you ever find yourself in old Malay, and I mean old Malay, the kind that existed before speedboats, before ferries, before people argued about Wi-Fi speed, you'd see a very different kind of capital city. Today, Malay is busy, loud, and packed with scooters that appear to multiply like excited rabbits. But back then, it was slow, peaceful, and surprisingly quiet. You could hear your own footsteps on the coral stone streets, and that was considered normal, not alarming. At the center of this calm little island stood the royal palace. And no, it wasn't a huge castle with stone towers, fire-breathing gargoyles, and a moat filled with suspicious fish. The Maldives did things differently. Their palace was made from coconut wood and coral blocks, carved carefully by island craftsmen. It wasn't huge. It wasn't shiny. It wasn't screaming, "Look at me," like some royal buildings do. It simply sat there, softly, warm, welcoming. Almost like it might offer you a seat and a cup of warm black tea if you walked too close. The walls had a gentle, sandy color. The roofs were made of woven palm leaves, and during windy nights, they made a soft rustling sound that could put even the most stressed-out fishermen to sleep. At the entrance, there were always 2 large clay lamps, glowing with coconut oil flames. Not bright, just enough to guide the way, like the palace was politely saying, "This way, dear, watch your step." Inside the palace lived the Sultan, a calm man who preferred quiet mornings and well-brewed tea. He wasn't the dramatic type of king who yells, "Bring me my sword," at random moments. The only thing he asked anyone to bring was fresh fish curry, and sometimes someone's advice about coconut harvest schedules. He wore simple robes, had a neatly combed beard, and walked at a pace slower than a sea turtle who had just eaten a big meal. But the most charming part of the palace wasn't the Sultan. It was his daughters, Princess Amani, Princess Zulfana, and Princess Shahnaz. These three young women were famous in every corner of the Maldives, but not famous in a loud celebrity way, more like the island version of everyone knows them and speaks nicely about them behind their backs. Of course, the palace staff adored them. The cooks always saved the softest part of the breadfruit for them. The gardeners made sure the jasmine plants near their windows stayed blooming. Even the palace cats, who usually respected no human rules, behaved perfectly around them. That alone proves the princesses must have had special powers. The palace routine was gentle and predictable. Every morning, sunlight slipped through the coconut wood shutters and lit up the hallways with a golden glow. The palace maids moved quietly, carrying baskets of fresh palm leaves or small trays of fruits. Birds perched on the roof beams, humming their tiny songs. The whole building felt alive in a gentle, sleepy way. Breakfast was never rushed. Usually roshi, tuna, freshly grated coconut, and warm herbal drinks made from island plants. The Sultan always sat at the same wooden table. His daughters sat around him laughing softly, teasing each other the way sisters do, and telling stories from outside the palace walls. Because, unlike many royal families in other parts of the world, this one didn't hide behind gates. Their life was connected to the people. The princesses walked through the markets, greeted fishermen, and even helped villagers during festivals. They weren't distant or untouchable. They were part of the heartbeat of Malaya. And the young men of the islands, they were hopeless around the princesses. You could always tell when a boy had seen one of them in the bazaar because he would walk around with a dreamy look for the rest of the week, sometimes 2 weeks, depending on which princess it was. But the crushes weren't just about beauty. The royal household raised the girls to be gentle, to listen before speaking, to help before being asked. Their mother, the late queen, had taught them beauty fades like a sunset, but kindness stays like the ocean, and they lived by that lesson every day. The palace itself was a reflection of that kindness. There were no heavy locks or intimidating guards with huge spears. Instead, there were friendly watchmen who waved at children passing by and sometimes handed out fresh mango slices. The gate stayed open at certain hours so villagers could approach with questions, concerns, or even gossip, because yes, even in history, gossip existed, and the palace staff loved listening to it. The courtyard was one of the most beautiful parts of the castle. Imagine a small garden filled with breadfruit trees, jasmine flowers, and soft grass that felt cool under your feet. In the center stood a stone fountain carved with old patterns. The water didn't shoot dramatically into the air like modern fountains. It just trickled softly, making the kind of sound that could put you to sleep during a warm afternoon. This was where the princesses spent most of their day, reading, weaving mats, painting, singing, or just lying in hammocks and watching the palm leaves sway above them. Palace life wasn't full of stress or noise. It moved with the same slow rhythm as the waves touching the shore. The Sultan had a simple rule: a peaceful palace makes a peaceful kingdom. And it worked. People felt calm because the palace felt calm. The princesses felt loved because the people loved them. The whole place was like a big extended family where everyone knew everyone, and the ocean breeze carried stories from one home to another. Of course, the royal household had its responsibilities: meetings with island chiefs, discussions about fishing seasons, ceremonies for new boats, but everything was handled with patience. Nobody ever rushed through decisions. After all, the Maldives is made of islands, and islands teach you one thing: nothing good grows in a hurry. By the end of the day, the palace glowed with dozens of clay lamps. The princesses walked through the corridors, their soft steps echoing gently. The air smelled like coconut oil and jasmine. Cats curled up on warm stones. Old watchmen told quiet jokes to each other. And the sky above Malay lit up with stars so bright they looked like someone had scattered tiny pearls across the heavens. This was the royal household. Not loud, not giant, not dramatic. Just steady, warm, and filled with three princesses who had no idea how many hearts they were already stealing.
If you asked anyone in Old Malay which princess gave them the softest heartache, the kind that feels like warm tea settling in your chest, most people would whisper the same name, Princess Amani. She wasn't the oldest. She wasn't the loudest. She wasn't the kind to make a grand entrance with fluttering robes and an army of attendants. In fact, if Amani ever made an entrance, most people didn't even notice until she was already standing there, smiling shyly like she had accidentally walked into the wrong room. And that, strangely, was her charm. Amani was the quietest of the three sisters, the one who loved mornings, gentle routines, and the simple joy of watching the sunrise while everyone else was still trying to wake up their brains. While other princesses in other kingdoms were learning dramatic dances or practicing royal speeches, Amani preferred morning walks along the shore, where the waves curled over her ankles and left tiny bubbles behind. She kept her hair tied loosely with a strip of white cloth, and she always wore soft-colored dresses made from cotton that moved easily in the breeze. Nothing flashy, nothing heavy, just calm colors and calm fabrics for a calm girl. Amani's favorite hour of the day was the early morning, when the sky turned into soft shades of peach and gold. She would slip out of the palace quietly, like a feather sneaking away from a pillow, and walk along the coral paths that led to the beach. Palace guards tried to accompany her at first, but Amani would smile politely and say, "No need, it's just me and the waves." And when she said it, somehow, everyone believed nothing could ever harm her. Because honestly, what danger exists at sunrise on a Maldivian island? The worst thing that might happen is a coconut dropping nearby and rolling slowly toward your toes. As she walked, fishermen returning from their early trips would spot her from afar. They tried to act normal, row their boats like everything was fine, but inside, they were panicking. "There she is! Don't blink too much! Row steady, steady, steady!" Some even sat up straighter, pulling their stomachs in, fixing their hair, doing all the things humans do when someone beautiful is nearby. But Amani never noticed. She wasn't walking to be seen. She was walking because the morning made her heart feel light. Amani had a kindness that didn't need words. When she smiled at someone, even a simple fisherman, a beach sweeper, or a shy child hiding behind their mother, the feeling stayed with them all day. Some said her smile had the power to strengthen courage. Others said it made their knees weak. It really depended on the person. Her gentleness wasn't forced either. It wasn't something she practiced or tried to achieve. Amani was simply born with a soft heart. If she saw a broken shell, she picked it up carefully instead of stepping on it. If a stray cat wandered near the palace gates, she would quietly bring it food. If a child cried in the marketplace, she knelt down to ask why, even if her silk dress brushed against the dust. The palace staff adored her. They always saved her favorite fruits, tiny sweet bananas and fresh papaya slices. When she entered a room, the mood shifted. Not dramatically, but subtly, like someone opening a window and letting a soft breeze in. Even her laugh was quiet. Not a loud burst, not a giggle storm, just a soft sound that made people smile without knowing why. A few boatmen swore hearing that laugh added at least 2 extra years to their life. Amani was also known for her gentle habits. She loved reading old island manuscripts, especially the ones filled with small stories about sea spirits, brave fishermen, or magical shells.
She'd sit under a breadfruit tree in the palace courtyard, feet tucked under her, reading slowly while the leaves danced overhead. Sometimes she'd pause mid-sentence, distracted by the sound of birds or the shift of the breeze. She seemed to be in a constant conversation with the island itself, and somehow everyone believed the island responded. Even among her sisters, Amani held a special softness. Zulfana, the artistic sister, always teased her by saying, "Amani, you're too gentle. Even the wind listens to you." Shihanaz, the singing sister, joked, "If you stared at a storm cloud long enough, it would probably apologize and leave." Amani would just smile and shrug. But the truth was, the island really did love her. One day, a fisherman named Mahir, well known for being fearless but absolutely hopeless around princesses, claimed that he once saw Amani walking near the shore, and the waves actually rolled in slower, as if they didn't want to splash her dress. Of course, the other men laughed at him, but secretly, they believed him a little. Amani wasn't dramatic. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She never asked for attention, yet somehow, attention always found her. Even little moments with her could become big memories for someone else. For example, there was a young coconut seller who once tripped while trying to show off his balancing skills. Coconuts went rolling everywhere. The entire market gasped. But Amani simply laughed softly, helped him gather the coconuts, and said, "Happens to everyone." The boy talked about that moment for 6 months straight. And honestly, who could blame him? Amani's beauty was quiet, but her kindness was loud. Not in sound, but in effect. You felt it before you realized it, like warm sunlight resting on your shoulders. People loved her because she made them feel seen. Not judged, not ignored, just noticed, in a gentle way. Every young man in the islands, whether he admitted it or not, had a little corner of his heart reserved for Princess Amani, a space labeled soft feelings, guarded by a tiny emotional crab holding a flower. But Amani didn't know. She wasn't walking through life thinking she was loved. She was simply being herself. And that was enough. So, when the fishermen told stories about her, when young boys blushed and looked away, when men sighed into the evening breeze, they weren't falling in love with the princess. They were falling in love with the feeling, the soft, quiet, peaceful feeling she carried wherever she went. And that, more than anything, is what made Princess Amani unforgettable.
If Princess Amaini was the quiet sunrise of the royal family, then Princess Zulfaina was the soft, colorful sunset. Not loud, not wild, but full of warm shades and little surprises, like the sky deciding to turn pink just because it feels like it. Zulfaina was the second daughter of the Sultan, and people often called her the artist of the atolls. Not officially, of course. Nobody carved it on a stone. But every time someone mentioned her name, someone else would add, "Oh, the one who paints everything." And they meant everything. Leaves, shells, driftwood, coconut bowls, old fishing nets, the side of the palace's storehouse, and once, according to palace gossip, the back of one guard who fell asleep standing up. He didn't notice until someone asked why he had a bright blue flower between his shoulder blades. Zulfaina was that kind of princess, creative, playful, a bit dreamy, and definitely the reason the palace always smelled faintly of coconut oil, sea wind, and crushed pigments. Her favorite place in the palace wasn't the fancy hall or the main courtyard. It was a tiny, open-sided room on the eastern side, built almost like a beach hut. The walls were low and the windows wide, so the morning light could enter easily. The room was filled with little clay bowls holding crushed herbs, charcoal scraps, bits of coral powder, and natural dyes she mixed herself. She called it her color corner. Other people called it the room you should not enter unless you want paint on you forever. The royal maids learned that lesson early. One of them once tried to help Zulfaina organize her tools. She walked out an hour later with green streaks on her hair and tiny yellow dots decorating her cheeks. Zulfaina swore she didn't do it on purpose, but she also didn't try very hard to remove it. She said, "It suits you," nodding seriously. Zulfaina had long, wavy hair that always looked a little messy because she constantly pushed it back with paint-stained fingers. She wasn't the type to worry about perfect appearance. Sometimes she wore royal dresses, sometimes she wore simple cotton wrappers with smudges of color that she forgot to wash out. She didn't mind, and honestly, nobody else minded either. The young men of the islands adored her completely, not just for her beauty, but for the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about the sea or a new shade of blue she discovered by mixing crushed shells with coconut oil. Her enthusiasm made people smile, even if they had no idea what she was talking about. Zulfaina saw art everywhere. When she looked at the ocean, she didn't just see waves, she saw brushstrokes. When she looked at clouds, she wondered what shades she'd need to mix to paint them. When she watched fishermen pulling up their nets, she didn't see hard work, she saw movement, rhythm, a quiet kind of dance. She also had a habit of staring into the distance for long moments. People thought she was deep in thought. Sometimes she was. But sometimes she was just thinking, that coconut tree would look cute with a little red on it. Her sisters teased her gently. Amaini would say, "Zulfaina, you can't paint the whole island." Zulfaina always answered, "Why not? It's small." The princess often wandered beyond the palace walls, carrying a basket filled with shells, brushes, and her little pigment bowls. Children would follow her, calling her the color princess. She'd let them watch her work and sometimes even give them small painted stones as gifts. One of her biggest admirers was a shy teenage boy who sold dried tuna in the marketplace. Every time Zulfaina passed by, he froze like someone pressed a pause button on him. One day, she gave him a small, hand-painted coconut bowl. He almost fainted. His mother had to fan him with a palm leaf for 20 minutes. But Zulfaina didn't paint to impress people. She painted because her heart felt full when she did. She once told her father, "When I paint, it's like talking to the ocean." The Sultan didn't fully understand, but he nodded wisely, as kings do. Her paintings weren't dramatic scenes or perfect portraits. They were soft, flowing images, the curve of a wave, the shape of a fishtail, the quiet glow of moonlight on water. Simple things, but captured gently, like she was holding the moment with both hands. Zulfaia also had a special talent. She could mix colors that felt like the ocean itself. People said her blues were different, deeper, softer, somehow more alive. Her blues made people sigh without knowing why. Someone once joked that she used mermaid tears to make her pigments. She laughed and said, No, mermaids are too busy for that." One of her favorite subjects to paint was her sisters. Amaini sitting under a tree reading. Shehenaz singing by the balcony. Sometimes she didn't even tell them. She just painted quietly from the corner, capturing the moment like a soft sketch. At night, Zulfaina would sit outside near the palace garden with a lantern beside her, sketching by moonlight. The lantern created a warm circle around her, and the rest of the world faded into dark blue. The glow made her look like a little firefly sitting in the grass. During these nights, young men would walk by the palace walls, pretending they were out for evening air. But really, they were just hoping to catch a glimpse of the princess mixing colors under the moon. They whispered stories about her, that she painted dreams, that she could turn sadness into beauty, that she once painted a tiny fish so perfectly it swam away. Were those true? No one knew. But the stories made people smile, and Zulfaina didn't mind being the subject of peaceful little myths. Her creativity was gentle, not dramatic. She didn't demand attention. She didn't chase perfection. She painted because she loved the feeling. And that love was what made others fall for her. Not just the young men, but elders, children, traders, travelers. Anyone who saw her work felt something soften inside them. Princess Zulfaina carried colors in her heart the way the ocean carries tides, quietly, naturally, without trying. And that is why people loved her, because she reminded them that beauty lives in small things, simple things, everyday things. You just have to look closely. And if you can't see it, well, don't worry. Zulfaina will paint it for you.
If you ever walk through the islands of the Maldives at dusk, you'll notice how the world slows down. The waves soften, the wind becomes gentle, and even the palm leaves seem to whisper instead of rustle. Long ago, during the old royal days, people believed this peaceful hour had a guardian, a quiet princess named Shehnaz, who carried a voice so soft and warm that even the ocean leaned in to listen. Princess Shehnaz wasn't like the other royal ladies who loved bright jewels, shiny fabrics, or grand events. She preferred simple cotton dresses, mostly in soft colors that matched the sunset. While the palace was full of noise, guards marching, cooks yelling about missing coconuts, palace cats fighting each other for leftover tuna, Shehnaz would quietly slip away to the highest balcony. This balcony faced the endless sea, and every evening, just as the sky turned pink and gold, she would start humming. Her voice wasn't loud. It wasn't the kind of singing that made people clap or cheer. It was the kind that made you breathe a little deeper without realizing it, like warm tea on a sleepy night, like a lullaby that wraps around you without asking. And somehow, even though she sang so softly, her voice carried. Not because of magic, or maybe a tiny bit of magic, depending on who you ask, but because the island air loved her sound so much that it gently rolled it across the water. Fishermen out at sea would pause, hands still on their nets, listening to the faint melody drifting toward them. They told stories of how the fish swam easier, how the sea stayed calm, and how even the stars felt brighter when Shehnaz sang. One old fisherman swore that his wooden boat rocked in perfect rhythm with her tune. His grandson would later add, yes, the boat rocked because of the waves, but the old man refused to change his version of the story. Shehnaz didn't sing to impress anyone. She did it because it helped her think. Each evening, she sat on the balcony railing, yes, on the railing, giving her poor handmaidens daily art attacks, and hummed while watching the horizon. She said it made her feel connected to something bigger. Some evenings she sang about small things, the sound of shells, the sparkle of sand, the comfort of moonlight. Other times she hummed melodies she didn't remember learning. They simply arrived in her mind like visiting guests. People loved her for that simplicity, not because she was royal, but because she carried peace the way others carried jewelry. And it didn't take long for stories about her to spread through every island. Young men especially became a little too dreamy when her name came up. They said things like, Shehnaz's voice could calm a storm. Shehnaz's song touched my soul. Shehnaz once hummed and my headache left immediately. Although that last one was probably exaggerated. But Shehnaz never seemed to notice the attention. She was friendly in a quiet way, always gentle, always smiling a small, shy smile. If someone thanked her for her singing, she would simply say, "Oh, I was just thinking out loud," which made people fall even harder because somehow she made singing beautifully sound like an accident. One evening, something unusual happened. As Shehnaz hummed her soft tune over the water, a young man paddled his small boat closer to the palace wall. He wasn't trying to spy or cause trouble, he simply wanted to hear her more clearly. But as he leaned forward, completely lost in her melody, he accidentally dropped his paddle. It made a loud splash, echoing across the quiet bay. Shehnaz stopped singing and looked down. The young man froze. There's a rule in nature. If you stare at a princess from a boat while holding no paddle, you can't escape with dignity. Shehnaz, instead of being annoyed, covered her mouth and laughed softly. Her laugh was somehow even more calming than her singing. She called out, "Do you need help?" The young man answered, "Yes, but also no, but also yes,"
which didn't make any sense, but that's what happens when you fall in love and lose your paddle at the same time. Shehanaz sent palace guards to rescue him and his poor boat. She even asked if he was okay afterwards. The young man said, "Your Highness, I will cherish this evening forever." Shehanaz blinked and said, "Oh, all right then, please be careful next time." And just like that, she continued her peaceful life, unaware that somewhere in the kingdom, a fisherman was probably writing a terrible love poem about her. Despite all the admiration, Shehanaz stayed humble. When people gathered under the balcony to listen, sometimes bringing coconut snacks as if attending a quiet concert, she didn't change her style. She still sang softly, still hummed without showing off, and still let the sea carry her voice. Her singing became part of island life, a gentle tradition of dusk. Over the years, even long after her time, Maldivians remembered her as the princess whose voice helped the world slow down. Older folks said that if the evening breeze felt especially calm, or if the waves made a soft, rhythmic sound, it was Shehanaz reminding the islands to breathe. And honestly, who wouldn't fall a little in love with someone like that? Shehanaz princess never tried to be impressive. She simply brought peace wherever she went. And in a place where the ocean often sets the mood, she became the quiet heartbeat of dusk, steady, soothing, and unforgettable.
Life in the old Maldivian palace moved like the tide, steady, gentle, and unhurried. There was no rush, no loud trumpet calls announcing the king's breakfast. Instead, the palace stirred softly, like a sleepy cat stretching its paws, and the rhythm of the day became its own quiet music. Before sunrise, the palace lamps, simple clay vessels filled with coconut oil, were lit. A thin line of smoke curled up, carrying the faint, warm scent of oil and wicks. The flickering light danced gently along the wooden walls, painting shadows that moved like slow waves across the corridors. The lamps weren't grand chandeliers or glittering candelabras. They were humble, soft lights that gave the palace a cozy glow, enough to guide the footsteps of servants and princesses alike without startling the quiet of dawn. The palace cooks were the first real stir in the morning. They moved like practiced dancers, preparing meals for the royal family and the household staff. Clay pots simmered over low flames. Fish stew bubbled gently, filling the air with the aroma of fresh tuna, coconut milk, and subtle island spices. The cooks worked silently, occasionally sharing small laughs or humming a tune that had been passed down for generations. They chopped, stirred, and seasoned, all with a steady hand and an eye for detail. There was pride in their work, but no hurry. In the old palace, nothing was rushed, even breakfast. Meanwhile, the princesses themselves had their own slow routines. Princess Amani often started the day with a quiet stroll through the palace gardens. She'd pause under the breadfruit trees, run her fingers along the leaves, and sometimes pick a few fallen blossoms to tuck behind her ear. She would watch small birds flit from branch to branch, listening to the soft sounds of wings and chirps. Her mornings were never rushed. She seemed to move at the speed of thought, pausing for little joys that others might miss. Princess Zulfana, on the other hand, would slip into her tiny color corner to gather pigments and brushes. She liked to paint before the sunlight became too bright, capturing the early glow of the day in soft washes of color. Sometimes she painted the gardens. Sometimes she painted the servants going about their routines. And sometimes, quietly, carefully, she painted her sisters. The gentle folds of Amani's cotton dress, the soft curve of Shehnaz's hand as she held a book, the sway of palm leaves above the balcony. Every stroke was deliberate, slow, and full of love for the ordinary details that made palace life so peaceful. Princess Shahnaz spent her mornings practicing her singing. She didn't belt out notes or perform dramatically. No, her melodies were soft, measured, and calm. She would hum quietly near open windows, letting the gentle breeze carry her voice across the courtyards. Servants would pause to listen. Children would stop their play, and even the palace cats seemed to quiet themselves, curling closer to the warm stone floors to enjoy her voice. Her singing wasn't meant to impress. It was a natural part of the day, a gentle companion to the soft rhythms of the palace. Chores in the palace were simple and meaningful. The princesses learned to weave mats, a skill passed down from mothers and grandmothers. The process was slow and meticulous, requiring patience and attention. Long strips of palm leaves were softened by hand, then carefully intertwined to form patterns that were both practical and beautiful. As their hands worked, they would chat quietly, laugh softly at small mistakes, and share stories from the island outside. Even weaving became a meditative exercise, a moment to connect with the world around them without needing to rush. Reading was another favorite pastime. Old manuscripts, written on thin coconut leaves or handmade paper, contained stories about the islands, the sea, and past generations of royal families. The texts were often illustrated with simple line drawings or subtle colors. The princesses read slowly, savoring the words, imagining the scenes, and occasionally stopping to discuss a character or a legend with each other. Sometimes they would read aloud, their voices blending in soft harmony with the natural sounds of the palace, the creak of wooden floors, the gentle clatter of cooking, the soft rustle of leaves outside the windows. Meals were also taken at a relaxed pace. The royal family would gather around low wooden tables, sitting on woven mats. They ate with simple utensils, enjoying the food and the company. The princesses often helped serve, passing dishes quietly, arranging bowls of rice and fish neatly, or sprinkling coconut flakes over a curry. Laughter was soft, not boisterous. Conversations were calm, often about small joys, a new flower blooming in the courtyard, a clever fish caught by a young fisherman, or the latest pattern Zulfana had woven into a mat. Even palace maintenance followed the same gentle rhythm. Floors were swept carefully, clay walls repaired slowly, and small decorations adjusted with deliberate hands. Nothing was rushed. Every act, from the smallest sweep to the largest cooking pot stirred, became a ritual, a way to honor the quiet, steady life of the palace. Visitors, when they arrived, were greeted with gentle courtesy. There were no grand announcements, no trumpets. A soft knock, a quiet welcome, and perhaps a cup of warm coconut tea was offered. Guests often commented afterward that stepping into the old palace felt like entering a different world, a world where time slowed, worries faded, and every small detail, the light on the walls, the scent of simmering food, the gentle voices of the princesses became a soothing balm for the mind. By late afternoon, the palace seemed to exhale. The lamps flickered to life again, painting the hallways with a warm golden glow. The princesses finished their chores, their weaving, their painting, their reading, and sometimes met in the garden to share a quiet moment together. The cooks cleaned their pots, the guards walked their soft rounds, and the children of the palace played quietly near the edges of the courtyard. Even the breeze seemed to slow, curling around the stone walls and palm trees as if to settle everyone gently into evening. At dusk, the princesses might climb their favorite balconies, Amani to watch the waves, Zulfana to study the changing colors of the sky, Shahnaz to hum her melodies. The palace had completed its day. Everything was in place. Everything was calm, and everyone, from the royal family to the smallest kitchen helper, felt the rhythm of life moving slowly, beautifully, and deliberately, like the tide brushing against the shore. This slow rhythm was the heartbeat of the old palace. It wasn't exciting in the dramatic sense. There were no battles or grand celebrations in this daily life. But it was beautiful in its own way, the kind of beauty that made hearts feel light, minds quiet, and souls at peace. And it's in this gentle, patient world that the princesses learned the lessons of life, love, and the quiet magic of simply being present.
Even in the quiet rhythm of daily palace life, there were days that shimmered a little brighter. These were the festivals and special occasions, moments when the island seemed to pause just slightly, holding its breath in anticipation, like the sea before a gentle wave. In the old Maldives, festivals weren't about grand fireworks or loud music that made you jump. They were gentle, flowing celebrations, slow dances, soft songs, fragrant smells, and colorful decorations that brightened the calm island skies. And the royal family always played a special part in these occasions. The princesses, of course, were at the heart of it. Princess Amani brought her calm presence, greeting everyone with a soft smile. She would walk through the decorated corridors, pausing to admire the garlands of frangipani and jasmine that swayed lightly in the breeze. Children followed her quietly, sometimes holding her hands, sometimes just trailing behind to catch a glimpse of her serene expression. Even the oldest palace cats seemed to slow down as she passed. Princess Zulfana added color, literally. She painted small murals on wooden panels, designed patterns for banners, and even dyed fabrics to make the palace brighter. Her hands worked quickly, but her mind was calm, blending colors that reflected the ocean, the sky, and the soft warmth of the sun. The colors weren't loud or garish, they were gentle, the kind of shades that made you feel happy without realizing why. Villagers often said that when Zulfana's colors were around, the air itself seemed lighter. Princess Shahnaz, meanwhile, provided the music. She didn't sing loudly or theatrically. She hummed soft melodies or sang quietly from the balconies. Her songs drifted down to the courtyards, through the gardens, and even across the streets of Malé. People would pause in their preparations, carrying baskets of food or decorations, to hear her voice. Fishermen sometimes lingered in their boats, mesmerized by the soft tunes. Children stopped mid-run, enchanted. Even the older palace guards leaned on their spears for a moment, listening to the peaceful notes. Preparation for festivals was its own gentle ritual. Cooks made special dishes, fish curry simmered slowly with fragrant spices, coconut desserts were shaped carefully, and small baskets of fruit were arranged beautifully. Nothing was rushed. Every plate was a small work of art. Even the youngest helpers learned to move slowly and carefully, so nothing was broken or spilled. The palace corridors and courtyards were decorated with woven palm leaves, fresh flowers, and lanterns that would glow warmly as dusk approached. Each lantern was lit by hand, one by one, until the palace shimmered like it had borrowed the stars from the night sky. The soft light reflected off the wooden walls, the painted banners, and the gentle faces of the princesses, creating a calm, magical atmosphere. During festivals, small ceremonies might occur. Sometimes it was a blessing for a new fishing boat. Other times it was a celebration of a bountiful harvest.
Occasionally, dignitaries from nearby islands would visit, but even these official moments were quiet and gentle. No loud proclamations, no dramatic gestures, just steady, calm respect for tradition and the slow passage of time. Games and entertainment were subtle. Children might play simple games with woven balls or wooden toys. Storytellers sat on mats, weaving tales of sea spirits, brave fishermen, or island legends. Occasionally a dance would occur, but it was soft, flowing, and rhythmic rather than boisterous. Everyone moved with care, almost as if the gentle ocean breeze guided their steps. The princesses were never distant during these times. Amani would distribute food with a quiet nod. Zulfana would show children how to paint small banners or create patterns on mats. Shahnaz's voice carried through every corner, soft and calming, reminding everyone to breathe slowly, to pause, and to notice the beauty around them. Even the arrival of guests was different on festival days. Instead of formal greetings and stiff bows, the palace welcomed visitors with warmth. A soft cup of tea might be offered. A small painted gift from Zulfana could be handed to a child. A gentle smile from Amani or a quiet melody from Shahnaz created an atmosphere that was both regal and intimately human. At dusk, when the lanterns flickered to life, the music of the princesses mingled with the quiet chatter of villagers and palace staff. The air smelled of jasmine, coconut oil, and simmering spices. Shadows moved slowly along the walls. Children laughed softly as they chased one another between the lanterns. Even the sea seemed to mirror the calm inside the palace, lapping gently against the shore, as if it too were participating in the festival. Sometimes the princesses would walk to the palace balconies to watch the horizon. They would hold hands, share quiet laughter, and let the soft light and gentle songs guide them into evening. The palace itself felt alive in a slow, gentle rhythm. Each lamp, each flower, each soft note from Shahnaz's voice contributing to a serene, almost dreamlike harmony. And as night fully fell, the soft glow of the lanterns, the gentle music, and the subtle scents lingered. Visitors would leave feeling calm, villagers would return home with light hearts, and the palace would exhale quietly, ready to embrace the rhythm of the next day. These festivals and special occasions were never about noise or extravagance. They were about presence, about noticing the small, beautiful things, about slowing down, breathing, and feeling the world with gentle awareness. And in the old palace, they were always guided by the steady, peaceful influence of the princesses, Amani, Zulfana, and Shahnaz, whose calm hearts made the entire island pause and appreciate the simple magic of life. In a world that often moved too quickly, the old palace was a sanctuary. And during festivals, it shimmered just a little brighter, reminding everyone that joy could exist quietly, patiently, and beautifully, like a soft song drifting over water.
Even in the slow, gentle life of the palace, there were days when outsiders arrived, visitors and diplomats from nearby islands or distant atolls. Unlike the bustling courts of other kingdoms, the old Maldivian palace welcomed guests with quiet dignity rather than loud fanfare. Every arrival was treated as a soft ripple in the calm waters of the royal household, noticed, acknowledged, but never rushed or forced. When a visitor approached the palace gates, the first thing they saw wasn't a line of guards or the glitter of golden decorations. It was the steady calm of the gates themselves, carved from warm, reddish wood, the faint scent of coconut oil lingering in the air. A single palace guard would bow with understated respect, opening the gates slowly, ensuring the visitor felt welcome but not overwhelmed. Inside, the corridors of the palace moved with their usual gentle rhythm. Cooks stirred fish stews over low fires. The lamps flickered quietly, casting soft shadows along the wooden walls.
Even the palace cats seemed aware that guests were present, curling in corners and blinking sleepily rather than chasing one another. The princesses, of course, were always part of the subtle welcome. Princess Amani greeted visitors with her usual calm smile. She didn't speak loudly or demand attention. She walked slowly through the halls, her presence soft but undeniably noticeable. Guests often whispered afterward about how her quiet kindness made them feel seen, not as strangers, not as dignitaries, but simply as people sharing a moment in the palace. Princess Zulfana added color in her own gentle way. Perhaps she offered a small hand-painted gift to a child accompanying a visiting diplomat. Perhaps she guided a guest's eyes toward a delicate mural or a woven mat, explaining its story with soft words. Her attention to detail was never forced, never theatrical. She painted the world with subtlety, and visitors often found themselves captivated, drawn into her calm focus and creative spirit. Princess Shehnaz, meanwhile, provided the palace's soft music. She hummed quietly near balconies or corridors, letting her melodies drift to the ears of visitors as they walked through. Diplomats, accustomed to grand, loud courts, were often struck by the difference. The songs didn't demand attention, they didn't overwhelm, they simply accompanied the palace, like a gentle tide brushing against the shore, soothing everyone present. Visitors would often be invited to share tea in the courtyard. The cups were small, filled with warm coconut milk or spiced herbal brews. Food was served slowly, each bite carefully prepared to honor both taste and simplicity. Conversations were quiet, polite, and measured. The princesses might sit with them, not out of formality, but because they genuinely enjoyed the gentle exchange of stories, of traditions, and of small laughter. The palace itself seemed to adapt to the presence of visitors. Hallways felt slightly wider, the air a touch fresher, and the lamps a bit warmer. Even the palm trees in the gardens appeared to sway in rhythm with the subtle pulse of quiet diplomacy. Nothing was forced, nothing was hurried, everything was deliberate, peaceful, and kind. Diplomats were often surprised at how effective such calm could be. Negotiations, when they happened, were carried out with soft words and patient listening rather than arguments or showy displays. The old Maldivian callus seemed to teach a subtle lesson that presence and patience could speak louder than proclamations or threats. The princesses, of course, played a quiet role in this. Amani's calm demeanor often eased nervous visitors. Zulfana's thoughtful gestures reminded them of beauty in simplicity. Shehnaz's soft melodies created an atmosphere where tension slowly melted into understanding. Occasionally, visitors brought gifts, carved shells, small trinkets, or rare fruits from other islands. The princesses received them with gentle gratitude, never flaunting or overemphasizing the gesture. Amani might smile softly and thank the giver. Zulfana might examine a trinket carefully, noticing its textures and colors. Shehnaz might hum a quiet tune inspired by the gift. These small personal responses made the visitors feel honored, not overwhelmed. Evenings after such visits were slow and peaceful. The palace would resume its usual rhythm, but with a faint echo of conversation lingering in the corridors. Children might retell stories of the polite visitors. Cooks might recall a special dish they had prepared. The princesses often retreated to their quiet spaces, Amani to the gardens, Zulfana to her color corner, and Shehnaz to her balcony, humming softly. The palace seemed to exhale, satisfied with a day well lived, with relationships strengthened through calm presence rather than forceful display. Sometimes, a diplomat would stay for a night. Their room would be simple, warm, and quiet. The sounds of the sea outside and the flicker of lamps within created a gentle lullaby. Guests often woke the next morning feeling more rested than they had in years, and without realizing it, they had absorbed lessons about patience, respect, and the power of calm influence. Lessons embodied quietly by the princesses themselves. In this way, the old Maldivian palace became a place where visitors didn't just come to see royalty, they came to experience it. The slow rhythms, the gentle presence, the soft music, the unhurried life. They left carrying stories not just of grandeur, but of quiet beauty. They left carrying the calm influence of three sisters who taught everyone who entered that power need not be loud and that kindness could be stronger than display. And so, even though the princesses were known for beauty, charm, and creativity, their soft, patient ways left the most lasting impressions. Visitors returned to their homes not just with gifts or promises, but with memories of quiet corridors, soft lamps, gentle songs, and the serene presence of Amani, Zulfana, and Shehnaz. In the islands, it was said that anyone who visited the palace returned carrying a little of its calm in their hearts, a treasure more valuable than gold, more lasting than any decoration. And that treasure, more than anything else, was the mark of the old palace and its gentle princesses.
As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky with soft oranges, pinks, and purples, the palace and the island seemed to breathe a little deeper. This was the time everyone looked forward to quietly, the evenings by the shore, the gentle waves lapping against the sand, the faint scent of sea salt and coconut, the soft cries of distant seabirds. It all combined to create a rhythm so soothing that even the busiest day seemed to fade away. The princesses had their favorite routines for these evenings. Princess Amani loved to walk along the sandy beach, letting her bare feet sink into the cool, wet sand. She moved slowly, as if in time with the waves themselves, sometimes bending to watch tiny crabs scuttle across the shore. She didn't speak much, but when she did, it was in a soft voice, careful not to disturb the quietude. Fishermen or children who happened to be nearby would sometimes pause and simply watch her, admiring her calm presence without daring to interrupt. Princess Zulfana often carried a small basket with pigments and brushes. Even on the shore, she couldn't resist capturing the colors she saw. She'd sit on a low rock or a driftwood log, dipping her brush into crushed shells and plant-based dyes, painting soft impressions of the ocean, the clouds, and the soft, glimmering light of the setting sun. Children sometimes gathered around her too, eager to watch, and she would hand them tiny painted stones or scraps of paper with delicate sketches. Each piece carried a bit of the evening's calm, a gentle reminder of beauty in ordinary moments. Princess Shehnaz, naturally, spent this time humming or singing softly. She didn't perform for anyone. She sang because the air and the sea seemed to invite her. Her voice floated over the water, mingling with the rhythmic lap of the waves. Fishermen in the distance often paused, hands still on their nets, listening to the quiet melody. Her singing seemed to have the power to slow time, to make the day stretch gently into evening. Even the wind appeared to carry her tunes without disturbance, as if nature itself wanted to participate in the lullaby. Other palace members enjoyed the shore as well. Guards would take slow walks along the waterline,
sometimes with soft laughter or quiet conversation. Children of the palace played gently, tossing smooth stones or letting small boats drift in the tide. Even the palace cats often ventured near the edge of the sand, their paws leaving delicate imprints that were quickly erased by the gentle waves. Sometimes the royal cooks brought trays of simple snacks, fresh coconut pieces, sweet slices of tropical fruits, small cakes made from rice milk and coconut milk. These were shared quietly among the princesses, children, and a few chosen staff members. No loud conversations, no rush to eat, just a soft enjoyment of food and company, while the sky slowly changed color. Evenings by the shore were also a time for reflection. Princess Amani would sometimes sit on a large, flat rock, staring at the horizon and letting her mind drift. Zulfana would sit nearby, sketching tiny impressions of the water, the clouds, and her sister. Shianaz, perched on a low driftwood log, would hum a soft tune, her eyes half closed, letting the music guide her thoughts. The three sisters rarely spoke much during these moments. Words were unnecessary. The rhythm of the waves, the changing light, and their shared presence were enough. Occasionally, a fisherman or traveler from a nearby island would pass by. If they were quiet and respectful, the princesses might greet them softly. Sometimes Shianaz would hum a little louder to acknowledge them. Sometimes Zulfana would hand them a small painted stone. And sometimes Amani would simply smile and nod, a gesture that carried more warmth than any words could convey. Visitors, often left with hearts unexpectedly light, carrying memories of quiet laughter, gentle melodies, and calm smiles that lingered like a soft breeze long after the shore was left behind. The tide itself played a role in these evenings. High tide would reach closer to the palace gardens, sending a delicate spray of salt water over the rocks. Low tide revealed tiny tide pools filled with curious fish, crabs, and shells, a natural display that fascinated the princesses. They would walk barefoot over these shallow pools, careful not to step on any creatures, occasionally pointing out small wonders to each other or the children nearby. As dusk deepened, lanterns would be lit along the shore and near the palace walls. The soft golden glow reflected on the wet sand and the gentle waves, creating a dreamy, almost magical atmosphere. The princesses' activities didn't stop. They adapted to the changing light. Zulfana continued painting with soft, dim shades. Shianaz hummed even more gently, letting the lantern's glow guide her melody. Amani wandered slowly, appreciating the quiet beauty of the world transitioning into night. Some evenings, the sisters would sit together on a large, flat rock near the water. They would share small stories, exchange quiet laughter, or simply watch the horizon. The rest of the palace receded into gentle shadows behind them, and the island felt vast, calm, and almost timeless. The waves provided a natural rhythm, punctuating the quiet conversations or musical pauses. Even the sky seemed to slow down, brushing soft pinks, purples, and deep blues across the horizon in a measured, patient way. These evening walks and quiet moments by the shore were more than just routine. They were lessons in patience, observation, and appreciation. The princesses learned to notice small details, the shimmer of a fish's scales, the curve of a seashell, the soft colors of the clouds, or the distant cries of seabirds settling in for the night. And in doing so, they carried the calm of the sea into the palace, weaving peace into their daily lives and the lives of those around them. By the time night fully arrived, the princesses would return to the palace, carrying with them the lingering calm of the shore. Their footsteps were slow, their movements deliberate, and the soft memories of sand, waves, and twilight colors followed them quietly into the hallways and chambers.
The palace lamps glowed warmly, the evening meal awaited, and the gentle rhythm of palace life resumed, just slightly enriched by the serenity of the shore. In the old Maldives, it was said that anyone who walked the beach with the princesses at dusk carried a bit of that calm into their dreams. The waves, the lanterns, the soft melodies, and the quiet laughter became memories that lingered, like tiny treasures collected from the edge of the sea. Even the faint scent of coconut and salt water seemed to embed itself in one's heart, reminding everyone of the beauty in simple, slow moments. And so, the evenings by the shore were not just a part of daily life, they were a gentle ritual, a time when the world felt still, the princesses felt connected, and the soft, calming rhythm of the islands became a lullaby for anyone lucky enough to notice.
When the sun dipped fully below the horizon and the sky turned a deep indigo, the palace came alive in a different, quieter way. These were the nights of storytelling and legends, moments when the daily routines gave way to soft tales, gentle laughter, and the kind of magic that could only exist in calm, attentive hearts. The princesses loved these evenings. Princess Amani would sit cross-legged on a woven mat, her eyes reflecting the warm glow of lamps. She listened with quiet attention, her mind traveling alongside the story. Zulfana would perch nearby, sometimes sketching tiny illustrations inspired by the tale. Shehnaz hummed softly between stories, her voice weaving a delicate accompaniment, like the lull of the ocean outside the palace walls. The storyteller, an elder named Musa, had a voice that was smooth and steady. He didn't shout, he didn't act dramatically, he simply spoke, letting each word float in the warm evening air. His tales were full of island legends, old fishermen's adventures, clever spirits, and long-forgotten kings and queens. The princesses would lean in, silent but captivated, letting each story sink in slowly, savoring every twist, turn, and gentle moral. One favorite tale was about a clever little crab who outsmarted a giant sea turtle. The crab, though small and seemingly powerless, used patience, observation, and wit to navigate the dangers of the deep ocean. Children often laughed at the crab's antics, but the princesses appreciated the deeper lesson that even the smallest, quietest beings could make a difference in the world if they were thoughtful and careful. Another story told of a fisherman who found a glowing shell on a full moon night. He didn't take it immediately. He observed it for days, learning when it shone brightest, when the tide brought it close, and when the waves sang along. His patience rewarded him with knowledge, and eventually, good fortune. Princess Amani often repeated this lesson quietly to herself, that observation and care were more valuable than haste. Zulfana loved stories about art and creation. Tales of ancient painters and weavers, of simple patterns that carried deep meanings, fascinated her. She sometimes asked questions about how certain colors were made or how old weavers discovered patterns that survived for centuries. The storyteller would answer softly, and she would nod, her mind already imagining new designs inspired by the legends. Shehnaz, of course, was drawn to musical stories. Tales of sea spirits who sang to fishermen, of hidden melodies carried by the wind, of birds who taught human songs, all of these captured her imagination. Between stories, she hummed, experimenting with tiny variations on melodies she had heard in the legends. The result was that the stories themselves seemed to gain life as if her soft voice were another character in the tales. Visitors and palace staff sometimes joined the storytelling nights. Even adults who had been through long days of work slowed their pace, letting the stories wash over them. The hallways and courtyards were quiet, the lamps glow steady, and the night seemed to stretch gently, like the slow roll of waves on the beach. Laughter was soft, gasps were quiet, and applause, when it happened, was a gentle clap, almost imperceptible but full of warmth. Occasionally, a story would include a lesson about kindness, patience, or bravery. These weren't shouted lessons or dramatic proclamations. Instead, they were embedded gently in the narrative so that listeners absorbed them without realizing it. By the end of the evening, everyone present carried a small piece of wisdom in their hearts, quietly ready to apply it in their lives. Sometimes the princesses would take turns telling short stories of their own. Amani preferred tales of quiet observation, a bird she had watched, a sunset she had admired, or a moment of kindness she had noticed in a servant or visitor. Zulfana enjoyed telling imaginative stories, blending colors and patterns into her words, making even ordinary events seem magical. Shehnaz's stories were musical. She wove soft tunes into her speech, turning words into melodies that drifted gently across the hall. Children often listened with rapt attention, not because they were forced, but because the storytelling nights were mesmerizing. Even restless little ones found themselves slowing down, letting the tales capture their imagination. Sometimes they would fall asleep in the soft glow of the lamps, dreaming of clever crabs, glowing shells, and quiet princesses who hummed at dusk. The palace cats often participated too, curling up near the mats, purring softly, as if their presence was part of the magic. Outside, the waves lapped gently at the shore, adding a natural rhythm to the storyteller's words. Occasionally, a cool evening breeze would drift in through open windows, carrying the faint scent of sea salt, coconut, and flowering shrubs, enhancing the sense of calm that enveloped the palace. By the end of the evening, the soft hum of Shehnaz, the quiet applause of listeners, and the gentle crackle of the coconut oil lamps all blended together. The night felt full, yet peaceful. The world felt a little more connected. The princesses would retire slowly to their chambers, carrying the gentle lessons of the night in their hearts. The palace itself seemed to settle, basking in the calm after an evening of stories, laughter, and quiet reflection. And so, the nights of storytelling and legends became more than just entertainment. They were a way to connect, to share wisdom, and to slow down. The princesses' hearts, along with those of everyone present, absorbed the calm, the lessons, and the magic. By the time the first stars appeared in the sky, the palace had transformed into a sanctuary of gentle imagination, a place where even the smallest voice, the softest melody, or the simplest tale could leave a lasting mark. In the old Maldives, these nights were treasured not for grandeur, but for their ability to calm, to teach, and to create shared memories. And for anyone fortunate enough to experience them, the soft, magical world of stories became a reminder that quiet, attentive hearts could carry the most enduring kind of magic.
Not all parts of the palace were open to everyone. Some areas were tucked away, almost like whispered secrets. Gardens hidden behind tall walls, paths that twisted gently between coconut palms, and tiny alcoves where the breeze seemed softer and the air smelled sweeter. These were the secret gardens and hidden paths, places the princesses cherished most when they wanted quiet and reflection. Princess Amani loved these secluded spaces more than any grand hall or balcony. She would slip away through narrow corridors and winding staircases, her bare feet silent on the polished wooden floors. Her steps were slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial, as if each movement acknowledged the specialness of the hidden places she was about to enter. Once in the garden, she would pause to feel the cool grass under her feet, brush her fingers across delicate flowers, or watch a tiny lizard scurry along a mossy stone. Zulfana adored these secret gardens for inspiration. She carried a small sketchbook and brushes, sometimes pigments she had made herself from crushed shells or flowers. In these quiet nooks, she would sit for long stretches, painting soft impressions of the flowers, the palms, the patterns of sunlight filtering through the leaves. Sometimes she painted birds perched on branches, sometimes the gentle curve of a fountain, and sometimes the princesses themselves, captured in moments of serene stillness. Each stroke was deliberate, slow, and careful, a meditation as much as a work of art. Shehnaz naturally found the gardens perfect for singing. These hidden paths were insulated from the louder noises of the palace and the distant hum of village life. Her voice floated softly through the alcoves and under the shaded arches, blending with the scent of jasmine and frangipani. Often, a gentle breeze would carry her melodies along the secret paths, rustling leaves and making the air shimmer softly. Birds, crickets, and even the palace cats seemed to pause, listening quietly. The gardens themselves were carefully tended, but designed to feel natural. Stone paths meandered without straight lines, leading visitors past flowering shrubs, small fountains, and low hedges. There were benches carved from driftwood, hidden alcoves with soft moss, and tiny stone lanterns that glowed gently in the evenings. The princesses often discovered tiny surprises along these paths: a smooth shell tucked into a flower bed, a bird's nest in a low branch, or a single bright blossom growing where no one expected it. These discoveries were celebrated quietly, often with a smile, a whispered word, or a soft hum of appreciation. Sometimes, Amani would use these secret gardens for reflection. She would find a quiet corner, sit with her knees drawn up, and watch the world. She observed the slow dance of bees among the flowers, the ripple of sunlight on leaves, and the distant motion of the sea beyond the palace walls. Her thoughts drifted freely, often touching on dreams, small joys, or plans for the coming day. The gardens were a place to breathe, to pause, and to simply exist without urgency. Zulfana's creations were often inspired by these moments. She would notice the delicate curl of a leaf, the way light played across a petal, or the gentle sway of a palm frond. She translated these observations into small sketches and paintings, capturing not just what she saw, but the calm, meditative feeling of being fully present in that quiet corner of the palace. Sometimes she would leave these tiny pieces along the paths for others to discover, a subtle gift for whoever happened upon them. Shahnaz's songs transformed these hidden paths into an almost magical space. Visitors, palace staff, and even the princesses themselves would pause to listen. Her melodies seemed to carry lessons within them: patience, observation, gentleness, and the quiet strength of small, deliberate acts. The hidden gardens became a theater of soft music, delicate movement, and serene attention. Children sometimes wandered into the secret gardens, careful to move quietly and respectfully. The princesses encouraged them, often showing small wonders like a hidden fountain or a particularly fragrant flower. The children learned to slow down, to notice details they would otherwise miss, and to appreciate the small, understated beauty that could exist in a single leaf, stone, or petal. Even palace staff found solace in these areas. A tired cook might steal a few minutes of calm by a shaded bench. A guard might pause in an alcove to rest and observe the gentle rhythms of nature. The gardens, though quiet and private, were shared spaces in a subtle way, a reminder that peace could be found everywhere if one moved slowly enough to notice. At dusk, the gardens seemed to glow. Tiny stone lanterns reflected the last light of the sun, casting long, soft shadows. The flowers seemed more vivid, the leaves more tactile, and the air heavier with fragrance. The princesses often sat together on a low stone bench, whispering to each other, exchanging sketches, or letting Shahnaz hum quietly while they admired the gentle fading of day into night. These secret gardens and hidden paths weren't meant to impress or entertain anyone. They were sanctuaries, a space to observe, create, and reflect. The beauty wasn't loud or flashy. It was subtle, meditative, and enduring. And it was in these hidden corners that the princesses often felt most themselves, away from the demands of royal life, free to experience quiet joy and gentle contemplation. By the time the evening lamps were lit, the secret gardens would have fulfilled their purpose for the day. Leaves glistened with dew, the stone paths felt cool underfoot, and the princesses returned to the main palace, carrying the calm and inspiration of these hidden spaces with them. The palace itself seemed to sigh in contentment,
as if pleased that its quiet treasures were appreciated and preserved. The secret gardens and hidden paths of the old Maldivian palace were more than just spaces. They were lessons. Lessons in observation, patience, creativity, and the quiet joys of life. They reminded everyone, princesses, children, staff, and occasional visitors, that magic existed not in grand gestures, but in careful attention, deliberate calm, and gentle presence. And for those who wandered these paths with soft eyes and open hearts, the gardens left a mark that lingered quietly, a memory of slow footsteps on moss, soft sunlight on petals, the hum of a distant song, and the serene presence of the princesses who loved these secret corners more than anything else.
For the princesses of the old Maldivian palace, the sea was never merely a distant view or a backdrop. It was a living presence, calm yet powerful, gentle yet commanding. It shaped their days, inspired their creativity, and whispered stories that only attentive hearts could hear. The princesses had long learned that the sea, like life itself, demanded respect, patience, and quiet observation. Princess Amani often walked along the shoreline at dawn, when the sun was just a soft golden glow on the horizon. She would pause at the water's edge, letting the cool waves wash over her bare feet, listening to the gentle lapping against the sand. Occasionally, a small crab would scuttle near her toes, and she would watch quietly, fascinated by its delicate movements. The sea taught her calmness, that life could be observed, appreciated, and understood without force or haste. Zulfana was drawn to the colors of the ocean. She would sit on a low rock or a piece of driftwood, sketchbook on her lap, capturing the soft gradients of blues, greens, and silvers that shifted with the tide. Sometimes she would mix pigments from crushed shells or coral to replicate the subtle shimmer of sunlight on water. Her fingers moved slowly, deliberately, translating what she saw into gentle patterns, always careful not to disturb the tiny shells or seaweed scattered along the shore. Shehanaz, naturally, found music in the sea itself. The waves provided a rhythm, the wind carried melody. She would hum quietly or sing soft tunes, her voice blending seamlessly with the ocean's gentle sounds. Occasionally, fishermen in the distance would pause mid-cast, listening to her voice, carried by the wind across the calm waters. Her songs were never loud or performative. They were an homage to the sea's own quiet beauty. The princesses often explored tidal pools along the edges of the reefs. These small, hidden pockets of water were full of life. Tiny fish darting among the rocks, colorful shells, and delicate starfish clinging to coral. The princesses moved slowly, careful not to disturb anything, observing the intricate balance of life. Amani often pointed out subtle details to her sisters, like the patterns on a fish's scales or the way sunlight refracted through water. Zulfana would sketch these discoveries, and Shehanaz would hum soft tunes inspired by the gentle flicker of life beneath the surface. Sometimes, the princesses would join the fishermen in small, calm boats, paddling quietly in shallow waters. They never took the lead. Instead, they observed, learning about tides, currents, and the patience required for a successful catch. The rhythmic motion of paddling, the faint smell of salt and fish, and the subtle splash of water against the hull all created a soothing meditation. Amani marveled at the simple patience of the fishermen. Zulfana noticed the patterns of light on the water. Shehanaz hummed in time with the gentle waves, blending herself seamlessly with the rhythm of the sea. Evenings near the sea were especially magical. As the sun set, the sky melted into shades of orange, pink, and purple. The waves reflected these colors, creating a moving tapestry of light and water. The princesses sat on the sand, watching quietly, as the horizon blurred between sky and sea. The air smelled faintly of salt, coconut, and blooming frangipani. Each breath seemed to slow time. Each wave reminded them of patience.
Each soft melody reminded them of harmony. Occasionally, small rituals took place by the water. A basket of flowers might be floated gently on the tide, a silent offering to the sea's calm power. A small prayer or whispered wish could be carried on the wind, trusted to drift along with the waves. These rituals were never grand or dramatic. They were quiet acknowledgments of life, of gratitude, and of the enduring presence of the ocean in the princesses' lives. The sea also inspired stories and imagination. Shehnaz would hum tunes that became the foundation for little legends of sea spirits, mischievous dolphins, and hidden islands. Zulfana would sketch fantastical coral formations and underwater gardens. Amani would quietly recount observations of fishermen and their daily interactions with the sea, turning them into soft, reflective tales. Together, their shared experiences with the ocean became a tapestry of calm stories, gentle creativity, and peaceful observation. Sometimes the palace cats even followed the princesses to the shore. They would crouch by the water's edge, fascinated by the reflections and ripples, sometimes dipping a cautious paw into the tide. Their soft purring blended with the lapping of waves, adding another layer to the quiet symphony of the evening. Even when visitors came, the princesses maintained the serenity of the shore. Guests were welcomed softly, guided along paths near the water, and invited to share in the calm beauty of the ocean without overwhelming them with pomp or ceremony. The gentle rhythm of waves, the soft glow of lanterns, and the princess's quiet presence created an atmosphere of peace that lingered long after anyone left. The ocean, in all its vastness, never felt intimidating to the princesses. Instead, it was a teacher, a companion, and a source of inspiration. Its slow, deliberate rhythms reminded them that life, too, could be measured in quiet moments, small observations, and patient attention. Every wave carried a lesson, every tide a story, every shimmering reflection a hint of beauty to be appreciated with calm hearts. By the time night fully settled, the princesses would return to the palace, their feet carrying the sand and salt water, their minds carrying the calm and quiet lessons of the day. The palace lamps glowed warmly, the evening meal awaited, and the gentle rhythm of palace life continued, now enriched by the presence and serenity of the sea. In the Maldives, it was said that anyone who spent even a short time on the shore with the princesses carried a piece of that calm with them. The sound of waves, the shimmer of moonlight on water, the soft hum of Shehnaz, the thoughtful sketches of Zulfana, and the quiet observation of Amani became a memory that lingered like a gentle tide, always present, always soothing. And so, the sea was more than a landscape. It was a teacher, a companion, and a timeless friend. For the princesses, it was a reminder that calmness, patience, and gentle observation could be the most powerful forms of influence, and that even in a world full of beauty, the quietest moments often left the deepest impressions.
When the palace finally settled into quiet and the last lamp flickered low, the princesses often took to the halls for their midnight walks. These were never hurried or restless strolls. They moved with soft steps, letting the cool marble or polished wood guide their bare feet, and the soft whisper of the night remind them that even in darkness, beauty and calm persisted. The corridors were hushed, yet full of life in subtle ways. A stray cat, blinking in the dim light, might curl up on a low windowsill. The faint sound of a distant tide or the sigh of the wind through open windows created a natural rhythm to accompany their steps. Even the walls seemed to hold their breath, absorbing the quiet footsteps of the princesses as they wandered slowly from hall to hall. Princess Amani preferred the gardens that opened into hidden courtyards. She would walk among the moonlit flowers, noticing dew on petals, the gentle sway of palms, and the soft rustle of leaves in the night breeze. Sometimes she paused to watch a tiny insect crawl across a stone path or to admire the silver reflection of the moon on a fountain's water. For her, midnight walks were as much about observing the small wonders of the palace as they were about moving through it. Zulfana often carried a small sketchbook, even at this hour.
She would pause to capture shadows, moonlight, patterns of light filtering through the arches. The palace transformed at night, revealing angles, textures, and subtle colors that were hidden by the daytime sun. She loved translating these nuances into sketches, a quiet record of a world most never noticed. The strokes of her brush or pencil were slow and deliberate, almost meditative, and she often left her sketches in hidden corners for the princesses or palace staff to discover later. Shinaz moved differently. Her voice, barely above a whisper, carried through the corridors in soft hums. She didn't sing loudly, she didn't perform. Instead, her quiet melodies seemed to float naturally, accompanying the gentle sounds of the night, the distant waves, the soft purring of a cat, the subtle creak of a wooden beam. Sometimes, even the walls seemed to lean closer to listen. Visitors who happened to be in the palace rarely forgot the memory of her voice, a calm, haunting lullaby that threaded through the halls without interruption. These midnight walks were also a time for reflection. The princesses would walk together, sometimes speaking in whispers, sharing small thoughts about their day, their dreams, or their observations of palace life. Other times they walked silently, allowing the rhythm of their steps, the soft glow of lamps, and the gentle hum of the night to guide them. Words were optional, presence was enough. The palace at midnight revealed small wonders the day often concealed. A tiny lizard crawling along a wall, the shimmer of moonlight on a polished floor, or the delicate scent of night-blooming flowers, all of these details drew the princess's attention. They learned to slow down, to notice, to appreciate the quiet magic in every corner. Even palace staff, sometimes passing in the shadows, felt the soft gravity of the night and moved accordingly, careful not to disturb the serene atmosphere. Occasionally, Amani led the sisters to a quiet balcony overlooking the sea. The waves glimmered under the moon, gentle and calm, and the distant stars reflected faintly on the water. The princesses would lean on the railing, letting the breeze play with their hair and listening to the natural symphony of the island at night. Zofana might sketch the shimmering reflection on a scrap of paper. Shinaz might hum a melody inspired by the tide's rhythm. The palace itself seemed to breathe in sync with them, slow, steady, and alive. Hidden alcoves, secret staircases, and small courtyards offered private spaces along their route. Amani might pause in a courtyard to watch a flower bloom under the moonlight. Zofana might kneel beside a fountain to capture the gentle ripple of water in her sketch. Shinaz might sit quietly on a stone bench, letting her voice drift into the night. Each step, pause, and breath was deliberate, turning the walk into a meditation that nourished their minds and hearts. Even the smallest inhabitants of the palace participated in this calm rhythm. Cats padded silently alongside the princesses, moths fluttered around lanterns, and occasionally a cricket's chirp punctuated the quiet. The sounds of midnight life were subtle, never overwhelming. They complemented the princesses' slow movement, their quiet observation, and the gentle hums that threaded the palace together. Sometimes, Amani would leave small gifts along the corridors, a flower in a tiny alcove, a painted pebble in a shadowed corner. Zofana might leave a miniature sketch beside a bench. Shinaz, often last to return, left soft melodies lingering in the halls. By the time they retired to their chambers, the palace had absorbed these gentle touches, making even the quietest corners feel alive and attended to. The lessons of the midnight walks were subtle but profound. They reminded the princesses and anyone who observed them that beauty existed in slow movement, in careful observation, and in gentle presence. Grandeur was not necessary. Attention and patience were enough. The night taught them to notice what daytime often concealed, to cherish small details, and to move through life with deliberate calm. By the time the palace settled into deep night, the corridors echoed softly with memories of the walk. Footsteps, hums, and whispered words. The lamps cast long shadows that mingled with the moonlight, and the walls seemed to hold the quiet magic of the sisters' passage. The palace, ever patient and enduring, had once again become a sanctuary, not just of stone and wood, but of calm, observation, and gentle ritual.
In the Maldives, it was said that the midnight walks of the princesses left invisible traces, imprinted not on the floors or walls, but in the hearts of anyone who noticed. The calm steps, the quiet melodies, the soft sketches, and the gentle presence became a lasting memory, a reminder that even in darkness, light could exist, and that quiet observation could hold as much power as grandeur or ceremony. And so, the palace at midnight was more than empty halls and sleeping staff. It was a place of gentle movement, soft songs, subtle creativity, and enduring calm. And the princesses, walking softly in its heart, carried the night's quiet lessons with them, a treasure far greater than any jewel, and far more lasting than any spoken word.
Even in the quiet rhythms of palace life, there were times when gentle celebrations brought a soft sparkle to the island. These were the festivals of light and laughter, moments when the princesses and their people came together to honor the changing seasons, the ocean's bounty, or simply the joys of life. These were never hurried or loud celebrations. Instead, they were soft, deliberate, and full of subtle wonder. Preparations began slowly, often days in advance. The palace staff arranged lamps along the walkways, their golden glow reflecting on the polished floors and gardens. Delicate paper lanterns, colored with soft dyes made from flowers or fruits, hung from coconut palms and balconies. Even the smallest touches, a carefully folded paper flower, a tiny woven mat, or a line of shells along the path, were meant to honor the spirit of calm celebration rather than grandeur. Princess Amani enjoyed the quiet anticipation of the festivals. She would walk among the preparations, observing the careful arrangements and noting the gentle movements of the staff. Her soft smile and attentive eyes encouraged others to slow down and notice the small details. A lantern hung straight, a flower aligned just so, or a basket of fruits placed with care. For Amani, these were as important as the festival itself, a lesson in mindfulness and deliberate presence. Zulfana's contribution was always creative. She painted intricate designs on the lanterns, drew gentle patterns on the paper flowers, and sometimes created small sketches for children to enjoy during the festival. She loved the way the soft glow of the lamps transformed her colors, making them shimmer like liquid sunlight. Her creations were subtle, never overwhelming, but they added a quiet magic that made the festival feel alive and personal. Shehnaz's role was musical, naturally. Her soft humming or gentle songs accompanied the festival preparations, turning the mundane tasks into a shared rhythm. The staff and children moved more gracefully to her tunes, and even the soft rustle of the coconut palm seemed to harmonize with her voice. She sang not to perform, but to blend, to create a subtle atmosphere of calm celebration that resonated with every corner of the palace. When the festival finally arrived, the palace seemed to glow with a delicate radiance. Lamps flickered gently along the corridors and gardens, and lanterns swayed softly in the evening breeze. Children laughed quietly, tossing small petals into the air, and palace staff moved in coordinated, unhurried patterns. Even the distant ocean seemed to shimmer in harmony, its waves reflecting the golden light in soft ripples. The princesses walked slowly among the guests, sharing soft smiles, gentle guidance, and occasional whispered stories about the meaning behind each decoration or ritual. Amani observed attentively, making sure each visitor felt welcomed and included. Zulfana pointed out tiny artistic details, teaching children to notice subtle colors or patterns. Shehnaz hummed quietly, adding a musical layer that wrapped the entire festival in serenity. Games were simple and soft. Children might carry tiny lanterns along a meandering path or place painted stones in careful patterns. There were no loud competitions or hurried races. Instead, every action was deliberate, playful, and slow, meant to encourage mindfulness and enjoyment rather than speed or victory. Even the laughter was soft, like the gentle ripple of waves on the shore, adding a quiet warmth to the evening. Food played a gentle role as well. Palace cooks prepared simple, delicious treats: sweet coconut cakes, fresh tropical fruits, small bites of rice with honey, and tiny pastries made with care. These were laid out on low tables, allowing guests to enjoy them slowly. Sharing food became part of the festival's rhythm, a quiet celebration of taste, texture, and human connection. Lanterns were often floated gently on small pools or fountains, drifting slowly and reflecting soft lights on the water. This was a moment of reflection, a quiet acknowledgement of the passage of time and the beauty of impermanence. Princess Amani might pause to watch a lantern drift, Zulfana would sketch its reflection, and Shehnaz would hum a soft tune in response. These simple actions, shared among sisters and guests, created a sense of harmony and continuity, as if the world itself had slowed to participate in the festival. Storytelling was also part of the celebration. Tales of old kings, clever fishermen, and hidden treasures were shared in soft voices, often accompanied by Shehnaz's humming. Children sat cross-legged on mats, listening with wide eyes, while adults leaned back, appreciating the quiet narrative magic. Even the shyest participant found a sense of belonging, a feeling that they were part of something gentle, enduring, and beautiful. As the evening drew to a close, the festival's final ritual was always the most subtle and serene. The princesses would stand together on a balcony overlooking the palace grounds, holding small lanterns. They would release them into the air, letting the lanterns drift gently into the night. The soft glow of the lanterns seemed to float effortlessly, a symbol of light, hope, and quiet joy. No one rushed, no one shouted. Only the calm exhalation of shared appreciation filled the air. When the lanterns disappeared into the night sky, the festival was over, but its effects lingered. The palace returned to its calm state, yet the glow remained in hearts. Children carried the memory of gentle laughter, quiet games, and tiny moments of magic. Staff carried the satisfaction of having contributed to something beautiful and mindful. And the princesses carried the quiet joy of sharing calmness, creativity, and music with everyone around them. The festivals of light and laughter were never about spectacle or grandeur. They were about attention, presence, and the gentle weaving of community through shared ritual and observation. In the Maldives, it was said that anyone who participated in these festivals left with a heart slightly lighter, a mind slightly calmer, and a sense of connection that endured long after the lamps were extinguished. And so, the palace festivals became more than events. They were meditative celebrations of life's small joys, a rhythm of soft light, quiet laughter, and deliberate creativity. For the princesses, they were lessons in grace, patience, and shared beauty. Reminders that even amidst tradition and responsibility, gentle moments of wonder could transform ordinary evenings into memories that glowed softly for years to come.
As the long day in the palace came to its gentle close, the princesses often gathered in quiet corners to reflect. Twilight was a slow, meditative time, the sky painted in soft purples and pinks, the ocean's edge whispering lullabies, and the last lamps flickering golden light onto the palace walls. It was a moment to pause, breathe, and consider all that had passed before sleep claimed the world. Princess Amani usually started these reflections by walking slowly through the palace gardens. She inhaled the soft fragrance of night-blooming flowers and traced her fingers over smooth leaves. Each sensation, each quiet sound, the gentle ripple of a fountain, the faint chirp of a cricket, or the distant call of a night bird, reminded her that even ordinary moments could hold beauty if noticed with care. She often spoke softly to herself about what she had learned during the day: patience, the gentle power of observation, or the subtle joy found in small acts of kindness. Zulfana, ever attentive to detail, would often carry her sketchbook, recording twilight's fleeting magic.
The sky, the shadows on the walls, the shimmer of lanterns, and the delicate reflection of moonlight on water all became subjects for her soft, deliberate sketches. She drew slowly, capturing not only shapes and colors, but the gentle rhythm of the evening itself. Each stroke was like a whispered thought, quiet, unhurried, and full of intention. Shehnaz, naturally, wove melody into these quiet moments. She hummed gently as she walked, letting her voice follow the ebb and flow of twilight. The notes were soft, almost imperceptible, but they blended with the sounds of the evening, the faint rustle of leaves, the distant lap of waves, or the occasional purr of a palace cat. Her melodies were not meant to perform. They were reflections, carrying the calm and serenity of the palace into the night. The princesses often found small spots to gather together, a stone bench in a hidden courtyard, a low balcony overlooking the sea, or a quiet alcove lined with lanterns. Here, they would share soft words about the day's events. Amani might remark on a moment of kindness she had noticed. Zulfana might show a new sketch inspired by the sunlight on a leaf, or Shehnaz might hum a melody she had crafted during her walk. These exchanges were gentle and unhurried, full of warmth, humor, and quiet joy. Sometimes they whispered about the day's small adventures, a secret path discovered in the gardens, the curious behavior of a palace cat, or the intricate patterns revealed in the clouds above the ocean. Their laughter was soft, like the rustle of leaves, never loud enough to disturb the palace's calm. Even the humblest of these reflections carried delight, teaching them that beauty and joy were woven into everyday life, waiting to be noticed. The twilight reflections also gave them a chance to consider the stories they had heard, shared, or imagined. Tales of clever crabs, glowing shells, hidden treasures, or kind fishermen were discussed quietly. Each story carried subtle lessons: patience, empathy, creativity, or courage. The princesses would talk softly about what these lessons meant to them, how they could carry them into the next day, and how the palace itself seemed to hold the echoes of these narratives in its halls and courtyards. At times, they observed the stars emerging in the night sky, one by one, each twinkling faintly against the deepening indigo. The constellations seemed to guide their reflections, each star a quiet reminder of constancy, patience, and gentle beauty. Amani would note the pattern of stars like a map of lessons. Zulfana might sketch the constellation reflected in a small pool of water, or Shehnaz would hum a soft tune inspired by the night sky's rhythm. These moments often ended with what the princesses called good night whispers. Sitting close together on a soft mat or low bench, they spoke softly to one another, words of encouragement, gratitude, or gentle humor. Sometimes they whispered about hopes for the next day, dreams to explore, or simple acknowledgments of one another's presence. These whispers were never hurried. They were deliberate, tender, and full of care. Occasionally, palace staff and children would join in these twilight reflections, drawn by the calm and serene atmosphere. They did not intrude. They moved quietly, observing, listening, and participating in the gentle rhythm of the evening. A shared whisper, a quiet smile, or a soft note from Shehnaz's humming became enough to knit everyone into the peaceful magic of the moment. By the time the final lamps were extinguished and the night deepened, the palace was suffused with quiet contentment. The gardens, hallways, and hidden paths seemed to exhale in relief, their gentle presence absorbed into the memories of all who had wandered through them. The princesses, tucked into their chambers, carried the serenity of twilight with them, ready for sleep, dreaming, and renewal. The lessons of twilight reflections were subtle but lasting. They reminded everyone in the palace, princesses, staff, and visitors alike, that even the most ordinary moments could hold quiet magic, that calm observation and gentle presence were treasures in themselves, and that soft words and shared stories could linger long after the day ended. In the Maldives,
It was said that anyone who experienced the princess's twilight reflections carried a part of that calm forever. The soft observations, gentle melodies, quiet laughter, and tender whispers left marks not on walls or floors, but on hearts. The palace at twilight became more than stone and wood. It became a living sanctuary of mindfulness, serenity, and quiet enchantment. And so, as the princesses drifted into sleep, the palace held its breath in perfect stillness. The ocean murmured beyond the walls, the gardens rested under the moonlight, and every lantern, every hidden path, and every whispered word had become a part of the enduring calm. The princesses of the Maldives had once again reminded the world, softly, quietly, and unhurriedly, that the most powerful magic often lives in the gentle moments, in patient observation, and in the quiet whispers of the heart.